Hey plant lovers, if you're here, you might be struggling with your Fiddle Leaf Fig, and maybe the leaves are turning yellow or drooping or falling off, but don't worry, you're definitely not alone, and today we're going to solve these problems together. In this Houseplant Care 101 episode, I'll be covering a bit of the history on where Fiddle Leaf Figs come from and how that can influence their care, the importance of proper soil, watering routines, and pot choice, why Fiddle Leaf Figs have a reputation for being tricky to care for, and common conditions you may see like edema and root rot and how to resolve them. Fiddle Leaf Figs are among my favorite types of houseplants. I have a beautiful one here. I've recently moved, so it's in a new location. This beautiful plant needs to be repotted. Can't believe I found it for $19. So if you've been struggling with your Fiddle Leaf Fig, stick around and by the end of this video, you'll have everything that you need to bring your plant back to its best. This Houseplant Care 101 series is sponsored by rePotme.com. With rePotme, you can have all of your houseplant supplies delivered right to your door. They are a one-stop shop for all of your houseplant, orchid, or succulent needs. They have custom handmade houseplant soils ranging from tropical houseplants, cactus and succulents, pothos, snake plants, and more. I cannot live without their clear slotted orchid pots. They have amazing houseplant fertilizers and so much more. I've included their link in my description below, and you can get 10% off any soil with my code Ashley. It's always helpful to know the natural habitat of any houseplant that we bring into our home so we can try to mimic it to the best of our abilities. And Fiddle Leaf Figs are actually from tropical rainforests in West Africa, and in their natural habitats they grow massive, like up to 40 feet, and they really like that warm, humid environment. Understanding their natural habitat can help explain why we see some of the conditions that we see with Fiddle Leaf Figs in our homes, if they're not getting enough humidity, enough light, and so on. For example, in the tropical rainforest, they have a lot of humidity, and we're not always going to have that much humidity in our homes, especially in the winter time. So that's when you may see some crisping on the edges of the leaves, some drooping, maybe the new growth isn't as big as the older leaves, that kind of thing. Now that we understand a little bit about where these plants come from, let's talk about how we can replicate those conditions in our homes to keep them happy and healthy. First, let's talk about yellowing leaves. This is one of the most common issues that I see with Fiddle Leaf Figs, whether you are just bringing it home or you're coming into winter time or just in general, and it can be caused by a few different things. Yellow leaves are often a sign of overwatering, so Fiddle Leaf Figs are very sensitive to soggy soil, and if their roots are sitting in water, they can start to rot, which leads to those dreaded yellow leaves. And a lot of times people are hesitant to buy plants from big box shops because they say the plants are dying, and a lot of times this is actually from overwatering. And overwatering isn't necessarily from giving your plant too much water. It comes from having the wrong type of soil, which retains too much water. So that's a big reason why I'm repotting this Fiddle Leaf Fig that I just got, because you really only need to repot every 1 or 2 years. And especially if I have the right type of soil, like I'm not going to be worrying about this plant at all, versus if I leave it in the soil that it's in from the store, I'm gonna 50-50 chance it gets root rot. This looks pretty good. They prefer a well-draining soil mixture that retains some moisture but doesn't get waterlogged. Now you can make your own custom blend, something that is part potting mix and part perlite, pumice, orchid bark. Because I only repot my plant every couple of years, I like to use custom made soil blends because I know that it's actually made specifically for the plant. This is rePotme's Fig and Ficus Imperial Potting Mix. One of the tricks if you're trying to loosen up the soil is to get a chopstick or something like it, or a little stick, and just kind of loosen up the soil a little bit. Now Fiddle Leaf Figs can be a little bit sensitive, so you want to be super gentle as you are removing any of the excess soil, and you want to try not to disturb the roots too much. If the roots get too damaged, the plant will be focusing more on repairing those roots than growing new leaves. So you want to go about 2 inches bigger, which we have here, bigger than the root ball. And I wouldn't always go off of the previous pot that the plant had, because sometimes the root ball is a lot smaller than the pot it was in at the plant shop or nursery. So definitely always check the root ball first. Terracotta does a great job wicking away moisture. I prefer plastic pots because I don't want to have to keep watering my plant every few days. And plastic pots are great because they do somewhat retain more moisture, obviously, than the terracotta. But you want to make sure whatever pot you decide to go with has a lot of drainage, like this one does here. I'm a big fan of using nursery pots and then putting them inside of a cover pot. Now, There's lots of different types of nursery pots. I like these clear ones from rePotme because I can keep an eye on the roots, I can keep an eye on the moisture. It helps me know what's going on, and especially since I don't repot but every 2 years, it's just really helpful. And then I also can change out my cover pots, which is fun. So as I'm doing this, let's talk about watering. Fiddle Leaf Figs like to be mostly dried out in between waterings. So I wouldn't water on like just a set schedule where you know you're watering on Friday every single week. Like, just check your plant every Friday and make sure it even needs that watering, because it will vary depending on the time of year, the humidity levels, all that. And if your plant has a really good soil mixture like this one, you don't have to worry about it being overwatered. You want something where as you're watering it, the excess water actually comes through the drainage holes. So you'll want to have a saucer or something under your pot, but you just want to make sure that you don't leave that plant sitting in that water, because that could just lead to root rot. Now, a lot of people will actually use stakes with Fiddle Leaf Figs because they can somewhat tilt and lean. That looks great, and it's still standing up on its own, which is awesome. I can keep an eye on the roots. And after you repot your plant, you definitely want to give it a good watering, and then just make sure that you water it enough so that the water just drains through for a while. But yeah, this is looking really good. It also really helps to have a moisture meter. If you have a really large fiddle, sometimes it's hard to tell if it needs to be watered or not, and these things are great and super inexpensive. Let's take a moment to discuss why Fiddle Leaf Figs have a reputation of being difficult to care for. One reason is that they're very sensitive to changes in their environment. So if you move your Fiddle Leaf Fig to a new spot, it might go into shock and drop some leaves. However, don't be alarmed if this happens. The plant just needs some time to adjust. They also really don't like sudden temperature changes. So if it's the winter time, try to put your plant in a place where it's not going to get a lot of draft or air from the vents, or maybe pull it away from the window a little bit if it's really cold outside. Another issue you may be running into is their need for light. Fiddle Leaf Figs need a lot of light, in my opinion. I mean, they say bright and direct light, but that means like bright morning light, most of the day bright light. The leaves might get a little bit sunburned if you have super bright light in the afternoon, but I would err on the side of caution and make sure you're giving your fiddles a lot of light. And if you don't have a lot of light in your home, which a lot of us don't, grow light is a great substitution. I love to use grow lights. Now, fiddles will let you know if they're thirsty. They will start to droop their leaves. My plant over here actually is drooping its leaves a little bit. It is thirsty. So if you see that, don't panic, just check that the soil is somewhat dry. And if it's about halfway to fully dry, at that point I would give your plant a good drink, and you should see those leaves start to perk up. Now, if that doesn't help, it could be a humidity issue, especially in the winter time. So if that's the case, then you could mist the leaves or use a humidifier. It's easy to forget about fertilizing our indoor plants. We talk a lot about outdoor fertilizing, but I'd argue that indoor plants, it's almost more important, because outdoor plants can at least put their roots out and like find nutrients from somewhere else if they're not getting enough. Plants are completely limited to the nutrients in their pot, especially one that is as foliage dense as a Fiddle Leaf Fig. You might start to see leaves dropping and having issues if it's not getting enough food and being fertilized. So I would recommend going with a balanced fertilizer that's water soluble. So you just put some into your watering can, and it just makes it really easy, and it's easy for the plant to kind of soak up those nutrients. You can use an organic or a synthetic, and again, you can find them pretty much anywhere. So most of them, or pretty much all of them, are going to be great. I like the rePotme ones. I have used them a lot, so I'm speaking from experience. I've run out of the organic one, which I love a lot, but it has a little bit of a smell for the first day or two, but it's like all organic. It's like fish fertilizer, which plants love that. But the synthetic one is wonderful as well. And I have the synthetic one here. Like I said, I ran out of the organic one. Starting at half strength, seeing how your plant responds to it, because you don't want to burn those roots. It's always better to under-fertilize rather than over-fertilize. If your plant responds really well during the full growing months, like in the summertime and late spring, you can go at full strength. and then kind of taper back down. Now let's talk about some of the specific conditions that Fiddle Leaf Figs can develop. And one of those is edema. Edema is super common. It's hard to see a Fiddle Leaf Fig that hasn't gone through some edema. And it actually happens when the plant takes up more water than it can use, which causes cells in the leaves to burst. And you may notice small raised bumps or blisters on the underside of the leaves. Now this is a common issue with Ficus, and it's basically caused by overwatering or the soil not being well draining enough, which is why I'm very quick to repot my Ficus or my Fiddle Leaf Figs, my different Ficus varieties, when I bring them home initially, because it will help prevent that edema from happening, because the soil I know will be well draining enough, versus the soil that it usually arrives in from the store isn't going to be well draining enough to prevent that from happening. The best way to prevent it is to ensure that your plant isn't sitting in water and that the soil has time to dry out between waterings. You can also improve the air circulation around the plant, and that can help reduce the risk as well. Another condition you might see is root rot. This happens when the roots are consistently waterlogged. Again, why the well-draining soil is so important. And this can lead to the yellowing leaves and the wilting, and you will notice like a funky smell coming from the soil. So to prevent root rot, make sure your pot has good drainage and that you're not overwatering. Now, if you notice brown spots on the edges of the leaves, this could be due to a number of things: inconsistent watering, nutrient issues, or even a pest problem. Brown spots usually appear if the plant is getting hit with like cold drafts, or if there's like salt buildup in the soil from too much fertilizer. So flushing the soil with water periodically can help to reduce the salt buildup. It's always a good rule of thumb to wash your plant as soon as you bring it home. At least wash the leaves off to get rid of any eggs or pests that might be on there. And if you are noticing some pests, I recommend washing the leaves off or wiping the leaves off and then using, where is it? I have it somewhere here. Oh my gosh, it's literally right here. Insecticidal soap. This stuff is the best. So you can spray it on the leaves. It helps get rid of spider mites, mealybugs, thrips. You know, it's great for all insects. And then just give this one a good spray. Let it sit for a while. You can wash it off, maybe repeat the treatment. And then this, coupled with systemic granules, I have found is a very powerful combination for most pests. The systemic granules target pretty much everything except for spider mites, which spider mites this would take care of. I hope that these tips help bring your fiddle leaf back to full glory. They really are such wonderful houseplants, and if you know a few of these things, they can be very easy to take care of, and they're so rewarding. It's the type of plant that I will always have in my home no matter what. If you have a question, feel free to leave it in the comments, and we have a very knowledgeable plant community, so feel free to leave your fiddle leaf tips and tricks. That's always appreciated. Make sure to subscribe for more planty videos, and we also have a wonderful community on TikTok and Instagram. All right, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and I get to see you soon. Bye.